The year was 2347, and humans have been members of the Galactic Concord for almost 100 years. The Concord was a group of 12 different alien species who had agreed to live together in peace. From the very first day humans joined, they became known as the Peacemakers. They helped solve problems between other species. They sent food and medicine to planets that needed help. They always chose talking over fighting. Commander Daniel Hughes served on the Earth Defense Vessel Constellation. He was a quiet man from Montana with gray hair at his temples and calm brown eyes. He had spent 30 years in the fleet, and he believed deeply in peace. He thought any problem could be solved if people just talked long enough. The Vecna were different from humans in every way. They looked like giant insects standing on two legs. Their society was built around war and strength. They believed that the strong should rule and the weak should serve. For decades, they watched humans help everyone and fight no one. They decided this meant humans were weak. The Vecna tested human patience many times. Their ships would attack human trade vessels and then claim it was an accident. Their soldiers would insult human diplomats and then say it was a cultural misunderstanding. Every time this happened, the humans would complain to the Galactic Concord. Every time the Concord would do nothing. The other species were afraid of the Vecna. Then came the day. Everything changed. 3 human farming colonies sat on the edge of known space. These were small worlds where families grew food and raised children far from the busy center of human civilization. 12,000 people lived on these 3 planets. They had no weapons. They had no warships protecting them. They were just farmers. The Vecna attacked all 3 colonies at the same time. Their warships came out of hyperspace and began killing immediately. They did not ask for surrender. They did not give warnings. They simply started shooting. Lieutenant Catherine Morris was working at her station on the Constellation when the distress calls came in. She was young with red hair and freckles, and she had joined the fleet because she wanted to explore the stars. Now she sat frozen as she listened to people screaming for help. She heard parents crying for their children. She heard the sound of weapons fire and then silence. The Vecna broadcast everything. They wanted the humans to hear. They wanted the humans to know what was happening and be unable to stop it. Catherine turned to Commander Hughes. Tears ran down her face, but her voice was steady. She told him that everyone was dead. She told him the Vecna had killed them all and made sure humans heard every moment of it. Hughes stared at the display screen showing the 3 colonies marked in red. His hand shook as he gripped his chair. He had spent his whole life believing in peace. Now 12,000 of his people were dead because he and others like him had refused to prepare for war. The Galactic Concord held an emergency meeting. Representatives from all 12 species gathered in the Great Hall on the neutral station. The Vecna ambassador was a huge creature named Skethral. He stood before the assembly and spoke without any shame. He said the colonies were in disputed territory. He said the humans had been warned to leave. He said the Vecna had only defended themselves. Ambassador Linda Carter represented humanity. She was 63 years old, with white hair and kind eyes. She had spent her entire career building friendships between species. Her hands trembled as she stood to speak. She asked how the Vecna could call this self-defense. She reminded everyone that the Concord had approved those colonies 40 years ago. She said children had been born on those worlds who never knew any other home. She asked how anyone could kill farmers and call it defense. Skethral made a clicking sound with his mouth parts. It was how his species laughed. He said perhaps humans should have raised soldiers instead of farmers. He said nature favored the strong over the weak. Ambassador Carter looked around the Great Hall. She looked at the other species, hoping someone would speak up for humanity. The Netherian delegation looked away. The Kovani pretended to read their data screens. No one would meet her eyes. She understood then. The other species were afraid. They had always been afraid of the Vikaner. They had let humans be the peacemakers because it kept them safe. But none of them would risk war to avenge dead human farmers. Carter turned off her translator and spoke in English. She knew the others would not understand her words, but she needed to say them. She said that humans had tried so hard to be good. Then she turned her translator back on. She told the assembly that Earth would handle this matter alone. She said humans would not ask for Concord help again. She said they would not trouble anyone anymore. Back on Earth, the leaders gathered in Geneva. Admiral Patricia Blake led the military. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes like steel. She had warned for years that the fleet was too small. No one had listened. She told President Marcus Webb the truth. The human fleet had 47 ships. Most were small patrol vessels meant for escort duty. The Vekaner had over 300 dedicated warships. In a normal war, humans would lose badly. President Webb asked what options they had. He was a former engineer who had become president because he wanted to build things, not destroy them. Now he faced the worst decision any leader could make. Admiral Blake mentioned the old archives. Before humans joined the Concord, they had been different. They had fought terrible wars against each other. Nuclear weapons, biological weapons. They had nearly destroyed themselves more than once. When they joined the Concord, they sealed those records away. They wanted to prove they had changed. The president called them the Forbidden Files. Admiral Blake confirmed this. She said their ancestors had not been diplomats. They had been survivors. They had learned to fight with a brutality that shocked the galaxy. That was why the other species had been so eager to make humans into peacemakers. Everyone was relieved when humans chose peace, but the knowledge was still there, locked away, waiting. President Webb looked out the window at the Geneva skyline. Somewhere out there, 12,000 of his people lay dead. They had died because his government was too kind to prepare for cruelty. They had died believing their leaders would protect them. He made his decision. He told Admiral Blake to unseal the files. The Admiral nodded. She had been waiting for this order. Part of her had hoped it would never come. Another part of her had known it was only a matter of time. Humanity had tried to be good. They had tried to be peaceful. They had offered friendship to every species they met. And 12,000 of their children had paid the price. Now things were going to change. The galaxy had mistaken human kindness for weakness. It was a mistake that would cost them dearly, because humanity had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply chosen not to. That choice was over now. The Forbidden Files were stored deep underground in a place most people had forgotten existed. Old Washington had been a great city once. Then the Third World War of 2089 turned it into poison and ash. 200 years later, the radiation still made it dangerous. No one lived there anymore. It was the perfect place to hide secrets. Dr. Samuel Price led the team that went down into the darkness. He was Earth's best military historian. He had spent his career studying ancient battles as curiosities, things humans used to do before they learned better. Now he was about to learn that his ancestors had never really stopped being dangerous. They had just been waiting. The vault was enormous. It held weapons designs that made modern technology look like toys. It held chemicals and diseases that could kill entire planets. It held something called Project Prometheus, which was not a weapon at all. It was a concept, a way of thinking about war that turned everything into a weapon. But the files held something more important than weapons. They held ideas. Dr. Price called Admiral Blake on a secure channel. His voice sounded strange. He was frightened and amazed at the same time. He told her it was not just about weapons. It was a whole way of thinking about war. Their ancestors did not fight to negotiate. They did not fight to make a point. They fought to win completely and permanently. Admiral Blake studied the files for 3 days without sleeping. Coffee kept her going at first. Then stronger things. When she finally emerged, her staff barely recognized her. Something had changed behind her eyes. She told her officers they would need volunteers. People who understood what humanity was about to become. People willing to carry that weight for the rest of their lives. Commander Hughes was one of the first to volunteer. He had quit the fleet after the colony massacres. He could not make sense of his belief in peace anymore. Not after what happened. Now he stood in Admiral Blake's office wearing civilian clothes. He told her he had spent 30 years believing they could talk through anything. He had been wrong. Those colonists had trusted him. They had trusted all of humanity to keep them safe. They died still believing that help was coming. Admiral Blake told him this would not be a small war. When they moved, they would move to end the threat forever. She asked if he was ready for that. Hughes thought about the screaming on Lieutenant Morris's console. He thought about the Vecchiner ambassador laughing at dead children. He said yes. Across Earth, the transformation began. Shipyards that had built exploration vessels started building warships. Factories that made farming equipment started making weapons. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to healing diseases found themselves creating new ones that many people did not want to participate. Dr. Helen Barnes was a geneticist who had spent 20 years curing illnesses. When they asked her to design biological weapons, she refused. She said this was not who humans were. She said, if they did this, they would become exactly what they had spent centuries trying not to be. Admiral Blake came to see her personally. She asked Dr. Barnes if she had children. Dr. Barnes said she had 2 daughters. They lived on the Mars colony in a city called New Melbourne. Admiral Blake told her the Vecchiner had identified Mars as a target. If they attacked before humanity was ready, her daughters would die. Not because they did anything wrong. Not because of any argument about territory. They would die because the Vecchiner believed killing them would break human spirits. She told Dr. Barnes she was not asking her to become a monster. She was asking her to protect her children. Because no one else in the galaxy would do it. For her. Dr. Barnes joined the weapons program the next morning. 6 months passed. Earth went silent. Ships stopped traveling to other systems. Diplomatic missions came home. Communications with the Galactic Concord dropped to almost nothing. The other species barely noticed. They were busy with their own problems. The Vecchiner noticed least of all. They were too busy celebrating their great victory. They made plans to turn human colonies into slave camps. The soft, weak humans would learn to work for their better soon enough. The Vecchiner ambassador Skethrol sent a message to Earth. He demanded that humans pay tribute for the administrative costs of the colony massacres. It was an insult designed to humiliate. No one on Earth bothered to respond. A young Vecchiner intelligence officer noticed the silence. He flagged it as unusual in his report. Humans always responded. They always wanted to talk. This silence was different. His superiors ignored the report. They knew humans were cowards. The silence meant they had given up. There was nothing to worry about. It was the last mistake the Vecchiner would ever make. In secret shipyards, hidden in asteroid fields, human engineers worked around the clock. They built things that had not existed for 200 years. Things their ancestors had created during the dark times when humanity fought itself. The first of the new warships was called Retribution. Commander Hughes watched it take shape over months of sleepless nights. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Every line of its design spoke of one purpose: death. Lieutenant Morris had requested transfer to the Retribution. She wanted to be there when it was used. She still heard the screaming from the colonies every night when she tried to sleep. She wanted the Vecchiner to hear screaming of their own. Admiral Blake gave final approval for the attack plan on a cold Tuesday morning. She looked at the maps showing Vekinar territory. Hundreds of worlds. Billions of people. All of them believing they were safe from the weak humans. She thought about the 12,000 farmers who had died for no reason except cruelty. She thought about the Concord species who had looked away rather than help. Humanity had learned an important lesson. The galaxy did not reward kindness. It rewarded strength. For 100 years, humans had offered friendship and received contempt. That was over now. She signed the order. Across human space, the new fleet gathered. 12 ships. Only 12. The Vekinar would laugh when they saw such a small force. They would not laugh for long. President Webb addressed the military commanders before they departed. He told them what they were about to do was terrible. He told them it was also necessary. The galaxy had taught humanity that nice species get destroyed. The only way to survive was to be so dangerous that no one would ever attack them again. He wished them luck. Then he went back to his office and sat alone in the dark for a very long time. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. The stars blurred and vanished. When they emerged, they would find the Vekinar home system. And then humanity would show the galaxy what they had been hiding all along. Emperor Threkanol the Eternal came aboard the Retribution to sign his surrender. It was deliberate symbolism. The ship had been named for this exact moment. Retribution. Payment for what the Vekinar had done. Commander Hughes received the Emperor in the cargo bay instead of the command deck. This was also deliberate. The cargo bay was where ships stored supplies and equipment. By receiving the Emperor there, Hughes was saying that Threkanol was no more important than a box of spare parts. The Emperor had to walk past rows of human soldiers standing in perfect silence. They did not move. They did not speak. They simply watched him with eyes that held no mercy. Their stares made the Emperor's hard shell itch with discomfort. When Threkanol finally stood before Hughes, he tried to speak with dignity. He said the humans fought without honor. He said they attacked civilians. He said they used weapons that were banned by galactic law. He called them barbarians. Hughes nodded slowly. He agreed. He said yes, they were barbarians. The Emperor seemed confused. He asked if Hughes was admitting this. Hughes stepped closer until he could smell the chemical fear scent leaking from the Emperor's body. He said that humanity had been peaceful for 100 years. They had solved disputes for other species. They had fed refugees from a dozen worlds. They had sent doctors to planets that had never seen a human face before. He said the Vekinar had murdered human children. They had broadcast the deaths for entertainment. They had laughed while doing it. The Emperor started to say something about disputed territory. Hughes cut him off. He said there was no dispute. The Vekinar had wanted to see if humans would fight back. They had wanted to know if the soft humans had any courage. He smiled at the Emperor. It looked like a wound on his face. Now they knew. The surrender terms were harsh. The Vekinar fleet was completely destroyed. Every warship was broken apart for scrap. Their weapons factories were demolished. Their colony worlds were placed under human control. Emperor Threkanol was put on trial for crimes against humanity. The trial lasted 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings of the Emperor ordering the colony attacks. Messages where he laughed about human weakness. Plans for future attacks that would have killed millions more. The verdict was guilty. The sentence was death. Threkanol the Eternal was executed publicly. His death was broadcast across the galaxy, just as the colony massacres had been broadcast. Everyone saw it. Everyone remembered. Many species in the Galactic Concord complained about human behavior during the war. The Kovani ambassador demanded that humanity face punishment for their conduct. He said the weapons they used were illegal. He said the attacks on civilian targets were crimes. Ambassador Carter received him in her office. She was polite, but her eyes were cold. She asked about sanctions. She asked where these sanctions had been when human colonies burned. She asked where galactic law had been when 12,000 humans died screaming. The Kovani said that was an internal Vecnar matter. Carter told him it stopped being internal when the Concord refused to help. The other species had made a choice. They had decided human lives were not worth risking their peace. She said humanity accepted that choice. But the Concord had no right to judge how humans responded to being abandoned. The Corvani ambassador left without another word. He knew she was right. They all knew. The other species looked at humanity differently now. There was fear in their eyes. But there was also respect. The kind of respect you give to something dangerous. The Netherian ambassador came to Carter in private. She admitted that her species should have helped humanity. She called herself and her people cowards. Carter agreed. She said yes, they were cowards. The Netherian asked if humanity could forgive them. Carter thought about the question for a long time. She said she did not know. She said humans might not be the same people they were before the war. She was not sure forgiveness was something they could feel anymore. Back on Earth, there were no celebrations. They had won. The threat was gone forever. But the cost was measured in more than dead bodies. Commander Hughes went home to Montana. He stood in the field where he had grown up and watched the sun set over the mountains. The colors were beautiful, gold and red painting the sky. His sister found him there. She was the only family he had left. Their parents had died years ago. His wife had left him during the war. She could not live with what he had become. She asked if he was okay. He thought about the question. He thought about the orders he had given, the planets they had destroyed, the Emperor's face as they took him away to die. He said no. He was not okay, but they were safe. That was what mattered. She asked if it really was what mattered. He did not have an answer for her. Across human space, similar conversations were happening. Parents tried to explain to their children why things had changed, why their species had become something different. Veterans sat alone with memories that would not fade. Scientists destroyed the weapons they had created and then lay awake at night wondering if they had destroyed enough. Dr. Barnes went back to her medical research. She never talked about the war. Her daughters noticed that she jumped at loud noises now, that she could not sleep without the lights on, that sometimes she cried for no reason. Admiral Blake resigned from the military. She left no address where anyone could find her. Some people said she went to the outer colonies where no one knew who she was. Others said she simply disappeared. The woman who ended the war was too different from the woman who had started it to continue living the same life. President Webb spoke to all of humanity on the one-year anniversary of the war's end. He said they had done what was necessary. He would not apologize for survival, but he wanted everyone to understand what survival had cost them. He said they had learned they were capable of terrible things. They had learned that kindness had limits. They had learned that when those limits were crossed, humans were just as dangerous as their ancestors had feared. He paused and looked directly into the camera. The question now was what they would do with that knowledge. Would they become monsters? Or would they find a way to be something better? He did not have the answer. He said that was something they would all have to figure out together. The screen went dark. Across human space, people sat quietly and wondered what came next. The war was over. They had won, but victory felt hollow when you had lost part of yourself to achieve it. The Vecnar home system was called Kethrax. It was defended by 40 warships and 3 giant battle stations that floated in orbit around the planet. For 800 years, no enemy had ever reached this far into Vecnar space. The defenders believed their home was impossible to attack. They spent their days bored and lazy because they never expected to actually fight. Commander Hughes stood on the bridge of the Eve Retribution as it dropped out of hyperspace. The clock showed 0347, Kethrak Standard Time. Most of the defenders would be sleeping. 12 human ships appeared, where moments before there had been empty space. Alarms began screaming on every Vekanar vessel and station. Officers stumbled out of their beds trying to understand what was happening. The senior Vekanar commander looked at his display and laughed. 12 ships. The humans had sent 12 ships against 40. Either they had gone completely insane, or this was some kind of joke. Then the Retribution fired its main weapon. Project Prometheus, and created something the galaxy had never seen before. Human scientists had figured out how to fold space itself into a ball of destruction. When it hit something, that something stopped existing. Not destroyed. Not broken. Simply removed from reality. The first battle station vanished. 3 million Vecana warriors died between one heartbeat and the next. There was no explosion, no debris, just empty space where a massive fortress had been a moment before. The second station fell 3 seconds later. Then the third. The Vecana fleet tried to respond, but their movements were slow and confused. They had trained for years against enemies who fought in predictable ways. These humans were different. They moved like nothing the Vekanar had ever seen. Lieutenant Morris sat at the tactical station on the Retribution. Her face showed no emotion as she directed the attack. She had volunteered for this position. She wanted to be the one giving orders when the Vekanar died. Commander Hughes watched the battle unfold on his display. He ordered his ships to target the enemy command vessels first. Kill the leaders and the followers would fall apart. Human ships danced through the Vekanar formation, taking risks that no sane pilot would accept. They flew straight at enemy weapons and turned away at the last moment. They used their own ships as shields for each other. They fought as if they did not care whether they lived or died as long as they took enemies with them. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, 32 Vekanar warships were burning wreckage. The remaining 8 fled screaming for help on every channel. Their calls would echo across the galaxy. Every species would hear them. Every species would know what had happened. Hughes looked at the tactical display showing the debris field. He waited to feel something. Guilt, maybe. Horror of what they had done. Instead, he felt only cold clarity. The Vekanar had chosen this when they killed the colonists. Humans were just finishing what the Vekanar had started. He gave the order to set course for Vekanar colony worlds. They were not finished yet. News of the attack reached the Galactic Concord within hours. Ambassador Carter had stayed at her post even after her unofficial exile. Now she received a delegation of terrified alien diplomats who rushed into her office demanding answers. The Netherian representative's eye stalks were shaking with fear. He demanded to know what the humans had done. Carter smiled at him. It was not a friendly smile. She told him they had stopped being nice. The Vekanar Emperor was an ancient creature named Threkanal the Eternal. He had ruled for 200 years. He had never known defeat. When he heard what happened at Kethrax, he broadcast a declaration of total war against humanity. He promised to burn Earth to ashes. He promised to enslave every human in the galaxy. President Webb sent back a simple reply. He said, "Come and try." What followed was not a normal war. Normal wars have battles where sometimes one side wins and sometimes the other side wins. Normal wars have pauses for negotiation. Normal wars eventually end in compromise. This was not a normal war. This was extermination. Human fleets appeared without warning at Vekanar colonies. They struck with overwhelming force. They destroyed everything and then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Vecna worlds fell one after another. Not captured, not occupied, eliminated. Dr. Barnes's biological weapons were deployed on industrial worlds. The diseases she created targeted only Vecna biology. Other species were not affected. Within weeks, the Vecna war machine ground to a halt. Dead workers cannot build ships. Admiral Blake coordinated everything from a command center on Earth's moon. She had not slept in 11 days. Drugs kept her functioning, but there was a cost. Sometimes she forgot what day it was. Sometimes she forgot the names of the planets they had destroyed. She never forgot why they were fighting. The Vecna tried to fight back. They sent fleets to attack human colonies. Most never arrived. Human ships intercepted them in deep space and tore them apart. The few that reached their targets found the colonies evacuated. Empty buildings. Empty streets. The humans had known they were coming. Emperor Threkanal grew desperate. He appealed to the Galactic Concord for help. He pointed to the terrible weapons humanity was using. He said the humans were monsters who needed to be stopped. The Concord representatives looked at each other. They remembered how they had refused to help humanity after the colony massacres. They remembered the Vecna ambassador. Laughing at dead children, they told the Emperor they could not get involved in internal disputes. On the 93rd day of the war, the human fleet arrived at the Vecna homeworld, the planet that had never been attacked in 800 years. The heart of the Vecna Empire thought there were no defenders left. Every ship had been sent to fight the humans. Every station had been destroyed. The planet lay open and helpless. Commander Hughes looked at the world filling his view screen. Billions of Vecna lived down there. Civilians, families, children. Lieutenant Morris turned to him. She asked for his orders. Her voice was flat and calm. She had been waiting for this moment since she heard the colonists die. Hughes thought about what they could do. They could burn this world to nothing. They could kill every Vecna on the planet. It would be justice for the 12,000. But then they would be no different from the Vecna. He gave his order. He said to broadcast a message. Tell the Emperor to surrender, or they would destroy his military targets, one by one until nothing was left. The Emperor surrendered within the hour. The war was over. Humanity had won. But as Hughes looked at the planet below him, he wondered what exactly they had become in order to achieve this victory. He was not sure he wanted to know the answer. 5 years passed after the war ended. The galaxy was a different place now. The Galactic Concord still existed, but everything revolved around humanity. No major decision was made without asking Earth first. No conflict started without human mediators stepping in to stop it. Everyone remembered what happened to the Vecna. This was not what humanity had wanted. They had not fought the war to become rulers. They had fought to survive. But survival had consequences no one expected. Commander Hughes had retired from the military. Now he taught young diplomats at a school in Geneva. They came to him expecting lessons from a warrior. What they got surprised them. He told them the goal was to never do what they did again. Humanity had proven it could fight. Now they had to prove that they could do more than fight. One young student argued with him. She said the other species only respected humans because they were afraid of them. Hughes agreed. He said fear was a terrible foundation for peace. But it was a foundation. Their job was to build something better on top of it. Before the war, humans had been kind because they did not know how to be anything else. Now they chose kindness. That choice made it stronger. The former Vecna territories became a testing ground for these ideas. Human administrators worked alongside surviving Vecna populations to rebuild what had been destroyed. The work was difficult. Many humans could not look at a Vecna without remembering the colonies. Many Vecna could not look at a human without remembering their dead Emperor. Lieutenant Morris volunteered for the reconstruction effort. Her friends thought she had gone crazy. Dr. Barnes asked her how she could stand being around the Vikaner after what they had done to her. Morris had listened to the colonists die. She had nightmares about it for years. Mars said someone had to do this work. If humans just left the Vikaner to suffer, they would be no better than the people they had defeated. Humans had fought to prove their lives had value. Now they had to prove the same thing about everyone else. The work was not easy. A Vikaner village was burned by human extremists who wanted revenge. A human aid worker was murdered by Vikaner rebels who refused to accept defeat. Each tragedy threatened to start the war again, but slowly things began to improve. A new generation of Vikaner grew up under human administration. They learned to understand human faces and human feelings. Some of them began to see humans as something other than monsters who had destroyed their empire. A new generation of humans grew up knowing their species was the most powerful in the galaxy. Some became arrogant and cruel. Others became thoughtful and careful. The best of them understood that power meant responsibility. Admiral Blake appeared again on the 20th anniversary of the war. No one knew where she had been hiding. She looked much older than her years. The weight of what she had done showed in every line on her face. She came to speak at the memorial for the colony massacres. 12,000 names were carved into a wall of black stone. She stood before them for a long time before she found words. She said she had ordered deaths. Not the people on this wall. The others. The Vikaner. Millions of them. She gave the orders and watched them die and felt nothing. She had made herself feel nothing. It was the only way she could keep functioning. The crowd listened in silence. She said she was not asking for forgiveness. What she did was necessary. She believed that completely. But necessary and good were not the same thing. Humanity survived because they were willing to become something terrible. The challenge now was to become something else again. She turned to face the wall of names. These people died because humanity was too kind to prepare for cruelty. That was their failure. But kindness itself was never the mistake. The mistake was believing kindness would protect them by itself. It would not. Nothing would protect them except their own strength. But once they were protected and safe, they had a choice about who they wanted to be. She said those 12,000 people deserved better than what they got. Humanity owed it to them to build the galaxy they should have lived in. Ambassador Carter watched from the front row. She was old now and used a special chair to move around. She had spent 20 years rebuilding what the war had broken. The Galactic Concord was stronger now, fairer, more willing to help when species were attacked, because everyone remembered what happened when they did not help. A young reporter approached her after the ceremony. She asked what humanity's legacy was from this period. Carter thought about it carefully. She said humanity taught the galaxy that kindness and weakness were not the same thing. They showed everyone that you could be gentle and still be dangerous. You could offer peace and be prepared for war. She said that was a lesson worth learning, even if the price was terrible. The reporter asked if it was worth it. Carter said that was the wrong question. Worth it implied they had a choice. They did not. The Vikaner made that choice when they attacked the colonies. All humanity did was respond. The real question was what they would do now. Commander Hughes watched the memorial from a distance. He was too old for crowds. His bones hurt in the cold weather. His granddaughter stood beside him. She was a young woman who had grown up in a galaxy where humans were in charge. She had never known anything different. She had many questions. She asked if humans were the good guys. He smiled at her. She had her grandmother's eyes. He said good guys did not win wars. Determined people won wars. Humanity was determined enough to survive. Now their job was to be determined enough to deserve. what they survived for. She asked what that meant. He said it meant they kept trying. They kept building. They kept choosing to be better than they had to be. That was the only answer he had. The sun set over the memorial. 12,000 names glowed in the fading light. Across the galaxy, humanity continued its long journey from what it had been to what it might become. They were not kind because they could not fight. They were kind because they could. And that made all the difference.